Thanks for doing it, right? Obviously, we're very successful here. It's not like I won't shy away from any questions. But there's some misconceptions out there about what we do and who we are, and the opportunity to just come out and be normal.
Right. Yeah.
Disservice to beer drinkers if you're convincing people to only drink locally. Like, yeah, when I go to I don't know, Austin or something, I want to drink, see what's going on there that I maybe can't get around.
You can't get around there, yeah.
Man, if those guys can't experience beers from San Francisco or something, like that sucks.
Welcome to Two Beers and a Podcast with Brad and Mike, two marketing guys who love a great craft beer and the stories that go with them. I'm Brad Pruhoff, the word guy.
And I'm Mike Matei, the visual guy. And this show is all about the experience of beer, from the label to the glass, from the brew house to the bar. On today's episode, we're excited to be sitting down with Todd Ahsmann, president of Goose Island Beer, and Mike Seigel, R&D manager.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Hey. Cheers. From one end to the other.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Oh, it's great. Great to have you guys.
Yeah, I told Mike, I don't know, whatever it was a couple of weeks ago, I could see you guys doing something. And I was just curious, just introduced myself, and there you have it, man.
Yeah.
Pays to have your equipment out on the bar, I guess.
Yeah, we learned our lesson. Always have extra stuff out on the
Let everyone know what you're always doing.
Right.
Well, no, it looked like you guys had just set up camp. So
Yeah.
I love it when, I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years that you probably have as well that are like, I got my, started for my PhD hanging out at Goose Island, and people that have just set up camp here to do stuff, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Very fond memories.
Yeah, it was like that.
Anyway, man, what do you guys want to do?
Let's talk.
Quit bullshit and start talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I watch your podcast. I know you guys go sales and marketing sometimes, but maybe less Jebediah Poundage, but whatever you want to do.
Well, it's also about...
I'm free. I've got nothing the rest of the afternoon.
All right.
Good.
Good to know. No. We're really interested in the experience of beer, then how do you communicate that? And you guys are in different sort of your roles in thinking about that, but and have different histories with the company. So, we just kind of want to have a conversation about your relationship to this whole thing. I'm
glad that I brought Mike, because Mike and I have actually in the last week or so had a couple conversations about how we do communicate that to the world, and it depends on who we're talking to and what beers we're referencing. But it's been out for a couple days now. And this 20-minute video we did about a new beer release, Jebediah Poundage. And traditionally marketing, you wouldn't put a 20-minute video out, but we think for who this beer is appealing to, that it's a really, really interesting story, and it deserves 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Now when we do something that just we want awareness on Next Coast IPA or something like that, and we actually buy, a presence on social, you do 15 seconds. That's right. The attention span of people, there. But it just depends on who you're talking to. But
yeah, the context is what drives it, right? Some stories are need that much time, and I love we're the same brewery that puts out a 20-minute video on this kind of esoteric topic of history, and remaking this beer is the one that also does the field goal challenge.
Right,
It's like there's not one rule book for how to market and sell beer, in our opinion. We've got a wide range of beers, and we appeal to a wide range of beer drinkers. right? So you don't treat them all the same.
Yeah, and if we thought we could get the attention of everybody for 20 minutes to explain every beer, we would.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't. So
You know when to pull that card, I think,
Right.
and not very often, but you do it. I think, well, I asked Todd and said, what do you think about this crazy idea? At the time, we were even thinking a little bit longer. We could have gone even longer, but we kind of
I'm sure.
cut, you know?
Right.
You got to, what do the directors say? You got to kill your babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of good lines that were on the cutting room floor, but the heart of the story is there for sure.
And the good thing is we do all that internally, so
Yeah.
we can edit it, unedit it,
Right.
look at it, have all the time in the world to get it right. We have 2 guys on our team. One guy actually we grabbed him away from a podcast, Hotcast
right?
yeah. Who do all our content. So it gives
Yeah.
us a lot of flexibility to do what we want to do and film it as long as we want, as many times as we want, and then edit it down. But it's fun. We're storytellers.
Yeah.
Well, and having that in place, you allow yourself to tell those different stories. I mean, just making the space for having 2 people on staff to be able to produce stuff like that, it shows that you want to tell the stories.
Yeah, and they're people who are, passionate about beer, who, help us
Right.
tell the story as well. And it's the only way to do it, but yeah.
You got to love it, otherwise no one cares about this. You got to care about the other topic in the beer.
Yeah, we have a lot of people at the brewery that have no problem being on camera whatsoever and talking about beer, which makes it good too.
Yeah.
So for people who are watching and we haven't given any context yet, so we're drinking Honkers here. We have some of it's on cask now. And you recently decided to stop distributing it nationally, and it's only available here in the pub, right?
Correct.
And I was talking to...
And the tap room and our pub in Philadelphia.
Okay. So on draft.
Correct,
In
yeah.
Goose Island brewery locations.
Yep.
Okay. It was interesting. I was reading, I think it was in the Tribune, reporting on the decision and just how it's a beer that's sort of like, it's interesting like that there's, these are sort of emotional things when you discontinue a beer, and it's a normal business decision to like not distribute something that people aren't buying off the shelves. That has like a weird sort of emotional component to it. But I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about, you said when you like to drink Honkers when you're coming out here, and talk to us about beer for you.
That was my decision, and it was a very hard decision. Honker's Ale is the first beer that I really fell in love with, and it really just opened my eyes and palate to different beers way back when, 31 years ago. So for me to make that decision was very difficult. Unfortunately, just people aren't drinking those beers right now, that style of beer, ESBs, and our brewers are making so many great beers that there's only so many that we can get out to the world, and I felt that other beers deserve to be in the hands of beer drinkers. So we had to make way and get rid of Honkers. It's never gone forever. I hope that ESBs make a great comeback, and we've got an excellent one. That's why I don't want us to ever lose sight of it, and we'll continue to make it and serve it on draft. So we never forget what it tasted like and lose that palate. But yeah, those are easy business decisions, but very tough emotional decisions.
Even in England, I was just reading an article of how breweries in England, like Fuller's and other breweries, have rebranded and removed the word bitter from it. Like Fuller's London Pride they now call it original ale. Or a lot of these breweries, it's amber ale. So they're, even in England, the birthplace of this style of beer, they're feeling that word needs to go through a rebranding exercise.
Yeah.
Well, it is one of the weirdest names for a style, just because it doesn't actually help you understand what you're getting.
Well, and it's interesting. So that was the first beer that we ever gave a name to. It used to be back when that beer came out that, you know, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Goose Island India Pale Ale. It was the brewery and the style. That's you didn't name beers, and we knew that back then people did not like bitter beers.
Yeah.
So we gave it a name so people would just order a Honker's Ale.
Right.
Because we knew it wasn't a very bitter beer.
Right.
Now I think, you know, that style is probably out of favor because it's not a bitter beer.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Even though, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess, and I don't know if you have any insight on this. I guess our first episode I think we did looking at Sierra Pale and Boston Lager, just because those are flagship beers that I've seen declining sales, but yet their companies are like pushing them, getting behind them, and like making it a bigger deal. And then so it's interesting, I guess, to see it from your side going. Yeah, we still love this beer, but instead of trying to like double down on it, we're just gonna be like, okay, we'll do it where we in a couple places so we can keep it alive, but we're not gonna.
Well, we've gone through this multiple times, and Honker's Ale hasn't been our flagship for a very long time.
Yeah.
In Chicago, 312 Urban Wheat Ale has been our flagship. Nationally, Goose IPA has been our flagship. So yeah, Honker's was our flagship, and we went through this, and then people chose 312. That became our flagship just based on sales.
Right.
So this isn't anything new for us. Some of these other guys, you know, their flagship has been their flagship since day one, and it's getting a little tougher now. So I feel their pain. But yeah, we have multiple flagships, and we have a lot of things to fall back on, fortunately.
Sure.
Right. Well, and I'm assuming you keep that, like keeping extra things to fall back on. You build that in, right? I mean, you just want to be experimental here. You want to keep pushing out new stuff to really see what works, right? I mean.
Yeah, and that's always been the spirit of us. And Mike runs our R&D part of the brewery and has a pilot system, and
150 beers a year go through our tap room exclusives over at Fulton Street. So there's never a shortage of ideas. It's sometimes these things are very timely, and you guys, of course, know how the craft beer business has gone, particularly the last couple years, kind of hyper trend or specific, and of course hop-driven beers have become the American style of beer, whatever variation you find within that. And of course there's lots of beers on offer. Lager beer is not going away, but just hop-driven beers and variations of all those IPAs have become such a critical focus for us. You know, we launched Next Coast IPA this year, and of course Goose IPA has been doing great. So
yeah, I think it's really one of the things that's so distinct about Goose Island is we've always done, you know, as I'm looking at Matilda and Sophie on the wall here, and we're drinking Honkers, and Mike's talking about Next Coast IPA, we've always done a wide range of styles, so we've never pigeonholed ourselves into any one style, which no matter where the industry goes, we've already been there or we're ready for it, so it's just what we've always done. And I think you know, back when we started, there were about 80 breweries in the U.S. and everybody did every style. So we sort of have that permission and expectation to do it now.
Right.
With 7,000 plus breweries, guys are looking, and probably rightly so, for a niche, and they're relying on a certain style, or we're bitter, or we're sour, or what have you. That if that ever changes, then they have to pivot. But we've got it all, and it's not like strategic. It's just who we are.
Right, right. So this is a good time to put, maybe to back up a little bit and just because you've been here since basically the beginning of Goose Island, and so so maybe you can tell in brief sort of your relationship to Goose, and then I want to hear also from Mike too. But
sure. So I started as a bartender here in 1988, the year we opened. I just graduated college. I was going to go to graduate school, and at the last minute decided this cool brew pub thing sounded interesting, and until I really figure out what I want to do with my life, I might as well come bartend. And I had the insider information because Greg Hall, the founder's son, who ended up being our brewmaster for 22 years, and I have been best friends since we were 6 years old. So, yeah, I came to the pre-party before we even opened. That's how far back it goes. John had asked my father to be one of the original investors. He declined it. He regretted that till the day he died. So yeah, I haven't worked here for all 31 years, but I've been very close, and it's been near and dear to my heart the whole time. And I mean, if you want to have a 3-hour podcast, I can tell you about all the changes and evolutions of the industry in Goose Island over the years. But yeah, so I've been here from the beginning, and I've seen a lot of different regimes come in and different beer styles, and the original bubble burst way back in the 90s and all that. So I've seen it all, and to me, it still feels like this original place that we're sitting in, and it's day one. We have global distribution, which is just crazy, and so it makes me so proud. But I still freak out when I go to Naperville and see Goose Island beer, So it still really does feel like, to me, we're the same. It's the same thing as 31 years ago. But I love that we have beer all over the world. It's crazy. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But
awesome. Yeah. Thanks.
What do you got, Mike?
Well, I can't go back that far. I started in late 2011. I was hired on as a brewer. I came from IT, so I was an IT guy and home brewer, passionate beer lover, beer traveler. And
Columbia College grad.
I went to Columbia for sound engineering. I was actually in the music industry first for a couple of years,
really?
But realized that was kind of a crazy world.
I know, that's what I was saying. My away time was in the music biz, and
so that was the first couple of years. But yeah, it's crazy 18-hour days with very limited pay and no benefits. Does that sound interesting to you guys? In working with kind of fickle artists, I love music. I thought I wanted to be closer to where it was made, and realized it's best just to buy records, and not to get too close.
Hey, so when you came to Goose Island, you got to introduce your favorite band of all time on stage.
Yeah, Calexico. We've had a lot of amazing bands. A lot of my favorite bands have played at the Block Party. Low is another one, another great band. But so there's obviously a lot of music connections with Goose, which has been awesome to this day. So, but yeah, I started in late 2011 as a brewer. I was, I think, basically got permission from my wife to take a 50% pay cut and work crazy hours. The question from Brett Porter, who was brewmaster at the time, was, "Are you willing to work overnights, weekends, and 12-hour shifts for half the pay that you currently?" I said, "Sure."
I'm listening.
Sounds great.
Right.
So that's how I started. Was started as a brewer, and pretty much did all the various brewing and cellar roles for a couple years, and then got the promotion to, we called it innovation manager at the time, but I've since, same role, but I've since rebranded it to a research and development, just because innovations, as you guys know, is a buzzword.
Right.
And I didn't want my specific role to be a buzzword, right? So the job stayed the same. It's new beer development and kind of facilitating a very large brewing team to get, the engagement role to get 36 brewers part of the process of making beer. So most breweries are built with this pyramid of brewmaster and or founder creating recipes, and everybody else is more or less executing, right? Usually you just have a couple of people that really write recipes. Goose Island has been structured, at least in my time, very differently to be this very open, creative environment, which is very challenging, but I think it's very rewarding for the people that work at the brewery, the brewers. And we even get non-brewers involved in Fulton and Wood series, which has been ongoing for as long as I've been at Goose. So that's really the bulk of my job now is, as research and development manager, is to facilitate new beer development through the entire brewing team, which we got different levels of experience, right? We've got relatively new brewers that haven't written around a lot of recipes, and we've got brewers that have been around for longer than I have, and mixing those folks together and kind of training the next generation of brewers, not just in the technical sense of centrifuging a beer or running a brew house, but also the creative elements of how a recipe is structured. And everybody brings their individual experience to that, right? I think why we don't have a house flavor as well is recipes come from many different areas, right? When you've got one person writing the majority of the recipes, you end up sometimes, not always, but in some cases, breweries that have a very familiar path to each beer has been written from the same mental perspective. So you end up with, going to those comfort zones of, I know these hops, or I know these malts, or this yeast, and beers that could be a little bit homogenous, whereas we pull from so many different areas. I think it really comes back to that engagement piece, not just it works for us, but it's something that suits the brewers, and why we're able to keep our best brewers around at the brewery.
Yeah, which goes back, I think, to your question earlier about Honker, is why I think we're trend proof. When you're a brewer at Goose Island, you get to learn so many different styles. We work with a lot of different yeast strains, which I think is very, very unique. But we barrel age, right? We work with sours. We make IPAs, whatever have you. But it's a great place, and Mike is so integral to that, to teach these young brewers. And we have a history of brewers leaving and going on and starting their own companies or being brewmasters somewhere else, which we're so proud of. Right as we sit here right now, we've got Off Color on and John Lafleur's beer. We love John, but back to what you said, because of what Mike just was talking about, is why I think we're able to do what we do.
Well, in building it in, and when you were talking about the R&D with the younger and the older, I don't know if you read the Robert Greene Mastery book, but I hear so many successful companies that they don't just go top down, no, this is my style, we're just going to do it my way. They have someone younger that can feed the middle, and the older feeding the middle. And so you kind of, if that's your lane, that's a wide range of experience. You can get people that don't understand, but I love that smell. Yeah. Okay, well, that's how we make the smell, from the older guy. And so building that in and just having that philosophy, seems great.
And I think, really, again, for us, it was about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, when some other big breweries were hiring a lot of brewers. We lost about 50% of our brewers in a 6-week period of time, which was nearly devastating to the brewery. And it made us, as managers, as brewing managers, really, really look deep into how we viewed the entire brewing team. And we said, we have to do better at engaging this next generation. We were basically training brewers. We were hiring people in. We had Zach Greenwood, who was a brewer, gone to the lab, was doing shifts in the brew house. That's how dire it got. And so we said we never lose brewers to another local brewery again like that. If somebody wants to live in Colorado and ski all day, those brewers have gone off because they want to go to that place. Right. You can't compete with what somebody's got in their mind as far as where they want to live. Or
start their own brewery.
Yeah, or start their own brewery. That's where this whole process came into be, was really a functional response of engagement. We want to keep our best brewers around, and quite honestly, these days, maybe not when Goose Island started, but these days brewers want to be part of the creative side of brewing, not just flipping valves and dragging pumps around. Right. They know that's part of the job, but writing recipes and being able to have your beer on tap and go, that's mine, and share it and be proud of that. That's what brewers want, rightfully so.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm curious, both of you guys were in music. Were there experiences or insights from that industry that you came back to beer, you were like, hey, what if we did it this way? Or that fed into, in terms of who you guys are and how you approach what you do, that you took from music to beer?
You know what? Again, having arrived at brewing relatively late as a career and having done some interesting jobs, but also having worked jobs where I wasn't really excited to go to work every day.
Yeah.
I think always having that in the back of your head, even at a bad day at the brewery, you're like, shit, I'm making beer for a living. It's like, we're not, bereft of stress. We are a business that wants to succeed. So we can't just have this bubble of anxiety-free work. That does happen, and we try to limit that. But at the end of the day, that's what I always look back to is, crazy days working a job that was paying me next to nothing, and I wasn't fulfilled. I was working with people I didn't like. I think we've got great people at the brewery, not just the brewers, but I work with just about everybody, and I think we've got an amazing group of people. That's drives a lot of my personal satisfaction. Just being able to, I got a pretty awesome job, to be honest with you. It's something that I never try to lose sight of is that. So having those previous careers to look back on is a good balance for maybe when you don't have a great day.
Right.
Yeah, and for me, 1,000%, there are similarities. And when I was out of the beer business, Greg Hall and I talked all the time, and we stole ideas from each other.
Yeah.
And the businesses are very, very similar as far as how we talk to consumers, how we reach beer drinkers, music listeners, whether it's going through the third party to get your music heard or get your beer sold, right? I don't think a lot of people know that we sell our beer to wholesalers. We don't sell our beer directly to retailers, and it's somewhat similar in the music business. But one of the most obvious similarities is the way you sell beer is getting people to try the beer. Right. The way you sell music is getting people to listen to the music. So it's something that needs to be experienced to sell it when it comes to marketing or sales. But I've integrated music into the beer industry because to me they go hand in hand. I could tell you, so many different experiences and concerts that I went to when I had a beer for the first time that are so vividly stuck in my memory. I remember the first time I had a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was at a bar before I went to a Pogues concert, and it was the first time I saw the Pogues, and it was very impactful for me. I can remember exactly what that Sierra Nevada smelled like, tasted like, everything about it, and the concert as well. It's just amazing to me, and I think why we do so many festivals and such like that. When you have a beer in your hand and you're at a concert, nobody can talk to you because you only hear the music and see the band, smell the beer, tasting the beer. There's no distractions. It's you and a connection, and I love that. But from the business side, there's the way it's segmented by consumers. It's just automatically in music, and I think even in beer, it's very easy to, there's a lot of people that are out there saying people like this beer, this beer, this beer. The lines are getting blurred, both in music and beer, but you can save that for another podcast. I could talk about the business side of it forever.
Yeah.
And how the similarities, but a lot.
That's and they're both very emotional. Like when a musician changes when Kid A comes out for Radiohead, like they lost some people because they were like the relationship changes as you change who you are.
It's a good example, actually. I remember when that came out, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, like a lot of people are like, what's happening?
I'm OK Computer, and what is this?
Yeah,
but now I think it's a masterpiece.
I would tell you, in every Radiohead's one of my favorite bands, and every album they've come out with, I've sort of been like, and then after 9 listens, I'm like, holy crap, this is the best album ever, right? And the same way your palate develops with beer, I think it's the same thing. There's maybe when people have bitter beers for the first time, they've only been drinking lagers their whole life. And then it develops, and the nuance, and you start understanding different beers.
Sure.
And it changes, but I think Radiohead's a great example.
Yeah, maybe a specific generational example or something too. I don't know if there's somebody newer.
Genesis and Phil Collins.
No, I think it was right. Maybe like I think was it Beyonce's Lemonade or something that got a lot of people upset, and everybody was like, "Oh no, Beyonce's black," and so maybe that's a more recent one. But I do want to ask, because I was thinking about this too this morning, about how emotional beer is for people and like the local connection and stuff. And because I was thinking, like, how do we raise the subject of the whole ABI thing? Because I'm sure you've talked about it a ton, and I don't want to like harp on it. But like, if you guys made artisan cheese and Kraft bought you, there might be like a small group of people who are like, oh, screw these guys, they went corporate and sold out. And then in 2 days, there'd be some other story we'd be interested in, right? Nobody's that invested in artisanal cheese to care if Kraft owns them.
We actually have the Cheesemonger Invitational happening at our barrel warehouse this weekend, so there are a lot of people very interested in it.
Well, there's a lot of great things to say about artisanal cheese. However,
They don't get pissed.
I'm not sure you'd have Jeff Allworth on the Beervana blog had a thing just last year about Goose Island, and kind of like the tension between sort of being big beer and acting like craft beer. I mean, it's 7 years down the road, 8 years down the road now. And it's still a sensitive subject for some people. So I guess I'm curious. So, like, were you there in the room that day when they made the announcement? What was that like for you? What's been your journey with that? And how do you, how have you evolved?
So I was there. I think I was the third person to know about it after John and Greg, and maybe Pat Hall, so maybe the fourth person. But Greg told me, Greg had just had his knees replaced, and I picked him up at the hospital, and he was staying at the hotel across the street. I wheelchaired him over there and was spending the night with him just to make sure he was okay. And that's when he told me, and we had already had a distribution deal with Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
And I knew that they had been talking to August Busch and such. But it still was a little bit of a shock, right? When I found out, and I just said, so what does that mean? And the first thing that Greg said to me was some of the best brewers and some of the best breweries in the world will be making my beer now. Right? That was the first thing he said, and then we just left it at that. But the brewery had been at full capacity for a long time. And John always said I could either have a bank own me or I could have a beer company own me in order to get the capital to increase our capacity. And he chose beer company. But he also looked at things like, I want to make sure the employees are taken care of. I want to make sure that the stakeholders in the company are taken care of. I want to make sure that the beer stays, true to what we believe it should be. And it touched on all those things. So I understand what is going on out there. I'll feel free to ask any question. I'll honestly tell you how I feel, but for me, I think it's like I said, I get freaked out when I see our beer, down the street still, not having it been distributed when I started working here, let alone around the world. And I think the job that these guys do with the beer, our beer deserves to be tried around the world. Why not? Right? And I mean, you kind of snuck in a little bit of a local question there. Local is great, and we have more employees now than we ever have, but sometimes I question that because, some of these, we talked about Mike and I going to London and drinking a lot of cask beer and everything, and, some of the beers that changed my outlook on beer are Belgian beers, right? Mm-hmm. Which influenced us. If everybody only said, I'm only going to distribute local beers, I would have never had Belgian beers. So I think that's doing a disservice to the consumer to just put a bubble around their beer choices and say you're only allowed to have beers made down the street and you can't have German beers and English beers and Belgian beers and even beers from Texas or California or New York or what have you. So I think it offered us the opportunity to just to change palates around the world. When Goose IPA came out, Michael Jackson, who, the most revered beer writer of all time, said that it was the most bitter beer in the world. He wrote, if you are ever in Chicago, stop by Goose Island. Yeah, you laugh because it's not a bitter beer now.
Not even
Right? We didn't have distribution then. He said, if you're ever in Chicago, stop by Goose Island and try the most bitter IPA in the world. Now, things that we do that these guys are working on so hard, people all over the country and all over the world have an opportunity to try it, and I hope they maybe try something that the same way the first time I had, Orval or Chimay, and it opens their mind to something
Yeah.
differently as well. So I think it's great.
And on that point, I think it's part of that Kid A experience of, as a brewer, putting something out there that isn't exactly expected, and what's the response? We've been caught up in a world for many years now where it's like tropical and lower bitterness, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are great beers. But that's kind of delivering what's expected, right? That's following a OK computer with another OK computer, right? I think as brewers sometimes, and don't get me wrong, we're in the business of selling beer, so we want people to enjoy what they're drinking, and we want them to buy another pint after they finish. And but I think as brewers, we like to go down different paths as well, and sometimes that's putting something out there that is a little unexpected.
I was talking to John, your other brewer. What's his last name? Sorry.
Legasky.
Okay. About how I just had natural villain the other day, and I poured it into a glass, and I realized that most of what I've been pouring in glasses recently has been like either stouts or like hazy IPAs, and I poured this thing in there and it was crystal clear. And I was just like, it just like threw me back like 5-6 years or something to like a different age of like when things used to be really clear, and that's like what you expected from like a lot of your beers, and it was great.
Yeah. Our beers right now are a little too clear. What, you guys want another one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right.
This person's like really
Battery out? Or?
Yeah.
Tucker's like, just want to make sure.
Just double checking.
He's your friend.
You know,
Thanks.
I'm good.
I go back and forth. Now I'm on the IPA kick. I'm on my citrus style, but I for a while I was into my saisons. I was into
Yeah, I went through a saison
stouts.
kick. Yeah.
As they like came into my life, it's like, oh, this thing exists,
Right.
and then you just have it for a couple months, and then you're like, all right. What about you? What's your like go-to? Honkers, obviously.
You know, it's like music.
Right.
I would say it just depends on the mood. I don't think I have kicks where I've always liked everything. It depends.
Yeah.
Whatever mood I'm in is what style of beer I
When
will.
there's some bands, whenever they come out with, you're like, I'll try that. Like, yeah, I'll buy that. Yeah, whatever. Certain breweries are just like, oh.
Yeah, but in the morning I want to listen to something different than at night. On Friday I want to listen to something different than Tuesday. Like,
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I get that totally.
Did you play any instruments?
no.
Mike, did you play anything?
Well, like a lot of folks, I had a high school band that I made some valiant efforts towards playing guitar. Mostly just a
Garage band?
singer, though. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we
That gravelly voice
kind
sings?
of well, it wasn't as gravelly then, but kind of like it's like a thread of my entire life is being a contrarian to a certain degree, and so I like to swim upstream, and so we wouldn't pin a style on the music we made. It was like wholly unique and not very good, but it was unique.
Right.
And so it was, again, music, like we've been talking about, it's critical to, I don't get to listen to it as much because I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 4-month-old. And so I had to put my vinyl record player away for fear of destruction.
Mine's back out.
Yeah. So I'm like, we'll see in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right.
So and now it's just a wall of vinyl still there. So I'm like,
Now that I know
try not
Mike's,
to draw attention to
Mike's
that.
a singer, though, I'll tell you another similarity. I mean, the same way I treated artists in the music industry, I treat our brewers.
Oh, really?
I'm like, these guys are artists. and
Right.
Now I know he's both. I didn't know he had a band.
Yeah, well, the whole beer is art thing is an interesting conversation, right? It's something I personally go back and forth on, and I think some beers are certainly an expression, and therefore have that ability to kind of be transformative and artistic. I don't think every beer is
It's a mix of art and science, right?
Yeah.
We say it all the time.
But I think it's possible, if you think about an expression, art as expression.
Do you think that falls on the brewer more, like the message or what they're really trying to convey, versus like someone that's just making a recipe? I don't know if that's the right way to
Or the
phrase it.
marketing
but-
team. I mean, there's
Well, I
that.
think it's a whole. I think it's a whole effort, and we talked earlier about content, creating content, and we got some fabulous people that are, in my mind, true artists because they're putting together, like the Jebediah Poundage video is a great example. It's something that I kind of had in my head for well over a year, and we shot a bunch of video, and we didn't really know. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to get there.
Right.
And we worked with Seth Ekberg, who is the one that edited it, and he shot it along with Ken Huntemeter. And Seth just did an amazing job really putting the pieces together to tell a story of, so it's a story about an old recipe, right? But it's also telling the history. It's also telling the personal history of Derek Prentice as a brewer for 50 years. There's a story of brown malt and how that was made. So it's an ingredient story. And then ultimately we're trying to tell the story of the actual beer itself, the final beer. So weaving in all these layers of story and trying to keep it interesting and not going too far off the rails, which some people would probably disagree that we did go off the rails, but we just committed to saying, you know what, we're going to own this story and not dumb it down for the 90-second masses. We're going to make this the real story that it needs to be.
Let's crack it open.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pull it out since you're talking about it, and you keep coming back to it, and I do want to talk about it. So let's go ahead and do that.
It just happens to be very timely since we're going to release it here in a few days. And,
I'm excited to try it.
Me too. I watched the
about
videos,
it.
okay.
So you guys have seen the video, so at least you know I don't have to give too much
And we'll link to it in the show notes for sure, because it's
It's great.
it's a very unique act of storytelling again because it's not the normal 15 to 90 seconds that you might take a chance on even on a YouTube video. Now, but also I'm thinking about
and I expect it to taste. You guys can tell me, but for me, winning here was making something that is like a beer you've never had before.
right.
May I see the bottle, please?
Let's make sure we get a shot of the bottle.
So what we don't know is what this beer actually tasted like in 1840.
Right.
But we've got documentation which we followed pretty darn closely. We got process which we followed pretty darn closely, ingredients and all that. So while we don't know if we did a good job or not, there's very few descriptions of porter of that era, but the little ones that we can find note a lot of the characteristics, the smokiness, of course, the bitterness. These were highly hopped beers. The brown malt, which not only provides smokiness, but caramel notes and nutty notes. And then the Brettanomyces.
Yeah, I'm smelling
1/3 of this beer is aged for a year in oak. So, but that was typical for beers of that period. The porter used to be 100% aged beer. Then they realized, well, we can age just part of it and then make fresh beer, and we don't have to have this crazy idea of aging all the beer. So that was really the innovation. You guys, heard Ron talk about in the video. That was the innovation of porter. Was the trade was aging the beer prior to that, the brown beer. Porter, the brewery said, no, we're going to take it back and age it. And Brettanomyces was present in all these beers. We did it. This is our second one we did with Ron. First one was called Brewery Yard, and it was like basically a pale ale of 1877. How Bass would have been in that period. Same thing. Brettanomyces was present.
Really? Yeah.
Means British fungus, right? And they used to call them stale, but in a good way. Aged beers with Brettanomyces, they'd use the term stale. Now it doesn't mean a positive thing, but then it was a positive. It hadn't gone off. It was aged, but it hadn't gone bad.
Yeah.
So,
you can smell it already.
What's the release with this? Like, what do you got nationwide or?
no, we're going just the tap room.
Just tap
I
room.
mean, it's a
Pretty
niche
small.
beer, right? Like we're not fooling ourselves.
Well, it's going to London too.
We're gonna
Okay,
it being a London porter, we're gonna ship some overseas.
Right. So
It's a tap room. We're trying to, 500. We've done a few 500 milliliter bottle sales out of the tap room. Trying to pick up some momentum there as far as out of the tap room, direct package sales, and I hope this brings a lot of attention to that.
Right.
But it's a niche beer. Like we're not fooling ourselves. But it's a great story. It's a great project. I'm very lucky that we get to do things like this.
it's a really interesting flavor. Yeah, and a little smoky from the malting.
That's the first thing.
A lot of bread in the nose.
Right.
Now, I don't get as much smoke in the aroma, but then the taste. It's
Right.
just it's kind of a mouth-watering coating character.
You don't get frightened to taste either.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. So
Well, I mean, this is your core. One of the ways I spent a lot of time here was these first Thursdays when the home movies would just bring
CBS,
yeah. So this is kind of the core people that support, and that's great to me.
absolutely.
Yeah, those were the guys that supported us from day one. So we will never stop supporting them back.
So then, so you're kind of getting indirectly at. So one question I was thinking about when I think Mike, you were saying something about there's trends and there's a certain effort to be trend proof and kind of you have some flexibility to play around with some of those trends, of course, but also like as it being a commercial venture, there's a certain amount of play between market forces and your own creativity but then you go and do something like this. But I mean, so you're basically saying this is like a labor of love kind of thing. It's like this isn't about trying to lead a new porter movement. This is just like we really want to see what this is about, and we just want to do this.
We hope that it piques that interest. Do I expect this to set forth a wave of aged porters? No, but even if it inspires a handful of brewers to start playing around with something like this, I think that's cool. But at the end of the day, we're doing this for the drinkers that I talk to all the time, and the people like Jeff Allworth. He's got a couple of bottles coming his way. He's super stoked about it. It's the special niche of Beer Geek is the beer history geek.
Sure. Yeah.
And the being able to taste something, looking at a recipe is great, but being able to taste, hopefully faithfully recreating something from the past is a great curiosity that I believe we've been able to put an answer to.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my mind.
And again, the video is a really interesting document of how you did that, of like trying to figure out the different pieces and how do you recreate that and who are the people you can partner with to get that result. And going and it was great to be able to go and get video on location and see them roasting the grains outside on those grates and everything.
That place is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the label. This is our first oval label, and it's of course inspired by bottle labels of the 19th century, which were pretty much all oval. So this is a way to push ourselves to do something new as well, but inspired by the past.
Yeah.
And I think that's the takeaway, the legacy of a project like this is, yes, this beer will be around for a little bit, then it'll disappear. We'll probably never make it again. But the legacy is, what did we learn? What did we learn about aging a highly hopped dark beer with smoky malt in a vat for a year? In blending it back with fresh beer, and the techniques that we'd never really employed before, a method of creating a bottle label that we'd never employed before, that we can say, what, we can apply this to different parts of our business going forward, I hope.
Yeah.
And the video, and a 20-minute crazy long video.
And it's fun to do.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
That made me think of music, just taking what's old and then just improving it, quarter or 50% and making it a new style, but just touching on that old stuff. I don't know if that's coincidental or what, but
yeah, no, you're giving too much credit for, I think, Mike and I bringing our music influence into the brewery there.
just trying to find everything. Trying. I'm a musician too, so that's what I look at.
Miss.
We all are, right? Drummer?
Yeah, I'm a drummer too.
It's similar in that there's only a certain amount of chords and notes you can play and how many arrangements you can do
figure
with
out
them.
the variations, yeah.
Yeah, cover songs from over 50 years ago. No one knows it's a cover song. It's new to them.
Yeah, exactly.
They've never heard the original. So, but this is this kind of combines. Porters that's such a good beer, but no one, it just gets a back seat to everything. So this is a way to bring it to the front with a little of the sour flavor. Yeah.
Some acidity, the Brett aroma.
Love that. Smoke is
And it
great.
should hold up well too. I mean, between the smokiness and the being a darker beer, and it's moderate alcohol, about 6.3. It should. I think it'll age fairly well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful beer, and there is, to what you asked, there isn't a strategy to get people behind porters now or anything like that, but there's a strategy to get people passionate about beer and the history and what it used to be and what it can be and what it is. So,
and realize that if you just pay attention to the headlines, you may just see that there's one style of beer that everybody wants to drink, but in the reality that I think a lot more people than we give credit are interested in drinking a wide range of beers. And
Sure.
that's, again, as Todd said earlier, if you go to our tap room at any given time, you're going to see IPAs, but you're going to see a lot of everything else as well. And that's why brewers like brewing at Goose Island. That's what we like. We know we have the opportunity to pretty much do anything we want. There's not a style of beer that we haven't made in my years here. So.
Yeah. So getting back to that strategy question, I guess, because Todd, you've been president now, 2 years?
yep.
And you oversee operations for Goose Island, but also Virtue?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Virtue cider.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm curious, when I look on the shelves and I see sort of like, I think of as your core brands, which just underwent like a visual branding change, and then you see like the Fulton and Wood stuff, which I'm always like, what is this? And then you have the sisters, and then you're coming out with this stuff, and then I'm seeing the Field Goal Challenge, and I'm seeing the locking up bikes around town on 312 Day, all these different things, and they, I think, on the one hand, are great in terms of just noticing Goose. I'm just noticing things Goose Island's doing. A lot of them are getting great social media coverage. And I'm curious, sort of like when you came in, and in the last couple of years as you've been in this role, what is your approach, or what kind of goals do you have for this brewery?
So I always want to stay true to who we were, right? From that day I worked here on opening day, right?
Yeah.
Or that day I was here for the opening party. And but I understand too that the industry changes and the company evolves, and it always has. But there are a few things that have always stayed true to Goose Island. One of those is Chicago. And I will never let us get off course from the fact that we are a brewery that's inspired by the city that we grew up in and that we're still based out of. So Chicago is very important to it. Beer culture, I mean, I feel like I don't have to say that, but maybe I do sometimes, and that's why we do a lot of these beers. So beer culture, never going to let that go away, and that's reflected in the people we hire and this and that. But when you mention all those things, it's really not. It wasn't like a strategy that I brought in and said, let's do this. It's more giving permission to the employees to do these things, right? It's everybody that works at Goose lives a lifestyle and lives in the city or outside the city, around the city. And so when they bring ideas, and Mike knows this, I very, very rarely say no, unless I think it's not right for our culture or is not respectful, or not something that I think is representative of Chicago and what we believe in. So, I mean,
And you lead by example too. You like to have fun, and you show it. And I think that is conveyed to everyone. Is let's have some fun. Let's sell some beer, but let's have some fun doing it. And
yeah, Mike was the first guy when I got in front of everybody. I think on the very first day that I came back as president, and I think I may have said, if the lawyers aren't calling me, we're not doing it right. And I want you guys to bring me those ideas. And I think Mike was the first guy that was like, okay,
I will.
I've got an idea for you.
Yeah,
He wanted
2 weeks.
He wanted to make a beer that is not legal.
Okay.
So took you
But-
literally.
But yeah, no, I think John was very respectful to the past of brewing history and built this place inspired by English pubs and
Right.
English beers. And then Greg came in and was very disruptive and very forward thinking and pushed some limits and some buttons. And I'm sticking true to both of their visions.
Yeah.
With Jebediah Poundage here, we're true to our past, and then we go out in the marketplace when we market things, and we try to get people out of their comfort zone a little bit. And
I think this beer is both. It's both tradition and pushing people out of their comfort zone.
right.
This is not a typical beer. and
Because
it
it's
doesn't have a
an old
typical
style.
flavor.
Right, yeah. Because we've learned how to, well, we've learned to think a different flavor profile is what's like right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so there's no genius strategy other than letting the employees do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But that philosophy is so hard for so many other companies to like do. That's like a direct threat on certain people's authority. And like just to give people the permission is that in itself has got to be. That's huge. That's the biggest.
That's
Like
exciting.
corporate doesn't work. Like corporate America doesn't let people do things like that. So to have a good open relationship and just being open to
It's
ideas.
exciting, and I trust the culture of the brewery that we're in the end going to do what's right and what people are interested in.
You got the right people.
Yeah, well, I was going
Yeah,
to
it's
say,
very, very important.
assuming you hire the right people, the people that are the best fit for the culture, letting them pursue their passions is going to be a mutual benefit. And as long as they've, are on course with what the brewery or the company is trying to do, and I think companies in general, not just breweries, but have been more progressive lately in that you want to harness that, right?
Yeah.
If you get people following their passions in a way that's beneficial to both, then they stick around. Right. They're not looking for the next job, or one foot out the door all the time. And going back to the creative side of brewing, what I talked about earlier, that's a big focus for us on the brewing side of things. Is we're going to get the best beers out of this brewery if we're harnessing the brewers' passions and letting them do some of the crazy ideas that they want to do, not putting caps on what they can do.
Yeah.
Right.
But normal people wouldn't do that, So just doing that is
that's
just
boring.
exactly. That's such a cool thing to be able to allow something like that to happen. So, cheers. Cheers to be able to.
Yeah, it's fun.
And tell us about this. It's a cream ale we're drinking.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. New beer, born and raised. We made it originally as a Fulton and Wood beer, which back to that culture. We have employees participate in making a round of beers every year. Sort of like a Shark Tank atmosphere. Groups get together and then they pitch ideas. We pick 4 a year or so, and then but this was originally from them about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
3, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a recipe based on Chicago's first brewery, one of their beers, their biggest beer, and I think it was probably the most popular beer at the time in Chicago.
And for a while, the Fulton Wood pitches, and even the ones we picked, were some outrageous beers. I mean, some of spruce tips, and
I remember that was the most expensive beer we ever made.
Spruce tips.
Our team actually went out to Colorado and cut the spruce tips themselves.
It wasn't a bad beer. It was very polarizing, but like Fulton Wood was associated with you at least one fruit addition, some other adjunct, some crazy malt bill. Like we just got on this path because before we had the pilot brewery, the RD brewery,
That was our outlet.
That was our outlet for getting a brewer's or even a non-brewer's idea out there and brewed. And so people were just wanted, it was just kind of became the junk drawer, and some of them were really good. And so this beer was pitched, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, well, there you go. It's relatively straightforward from a malt and hop perspective. It's some malt, a little bit of corn, and a gentle dry hop with German Tettnang. It's not meant to be like this aggressive American hopped beer, but just a nice noble hop character, and it gives a little bit of citrus, and it's easy drinking. It's it's about 5.9%. So from a complexity standpoint, I think it suited what we were looking for this Chicago only beer. We
wanted to appeal to all Chicagoans.
Yeah.
It's very accessible, yet will still make people, that maybe don't think twice about beer get interested in beer.
And we like, we call it a Chicago style ale, just like Natural Villain is a garage lager, right?
Right.
We start creating our own styles.
I see
within
that.
Styles.
Are you? So let me ask it, because that's on the one hand like kind of a fun thing to do. On the other hand, potentially, it seems risky in the sense of like trying to potentially. I always come at commercial attempts to change language. As a consumer, I'm always suspicious of when Snickers started coming out with those weird words for like delicious on their labels. It like drove me crazy. They were just like mashups of real words, and it was like I'm not using any of those words. Not gonna do it. But also I know that like when you call Natural Villain a garage lager, it's communicating. So I'm curious, like, do you worry about sort of appearing too cavalier and sort of creating styles that don't exist?
No, I don't. Somebody created a style at some point, but that's just marketing. That's like a name. It's like the part of the name of the beer, a garage style lager. I mean, so we made that beer in collaboration with Twin Peaks, a Chicago garage band. They refer to themselves as a garage band. So we wanted it to be like, this is a garage band. It's a beer you drink in the garage with a garage band jamming out in an alley party kind of thing. Right, but
my take on it too, whether it was the intent or not, was like a bit of a kind of a tongue-in-cheek response to the maybe over-stylization that craft beers become. Okay, right?
Yeah.
All these, how many different subcategories of IPA do we have, and all that. It's just.
Well, and look at Gozes, for example. Everyone's calling her beer a Goza, and there's so many different Gozas I've had that do not even kind of fit the definition of a Goza, and people are just throwing Goza out there. So, what's the difference between that and calling your lager a garage lager? I mean, this cream ale, even though we call it Chicago style ale, we're not hiding the fact that it's a cream ale. It's on the board right behind us here is a cream ale. It still says cream ale.
Sure.
We just think it's fun to call it Chicago style ale as a reference to the first brewery in Chicago and the beer that they made. And so it helps tell that story a little bit more. And if it gets people more interested in beer, great, right? But if anybody's going to call credibility, I mean, we just made this Jebediah Poundage, so come on, right?
Right. We can back it up with.
We're educating people on the history of beer.
Yeah.
That's really what
Let's
it is.
not get too serious either, right? I think that's a good reminder.
Well, yeah.
That's what I think of when I hear like garage lager and all that. It's like, it's fun. Let's remember we're in the beer business.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of this. I met someone at my daughter's soccer match last weekend who found out I worked for Goose Island, and actually he didn't find out until after we were talking about music, and he told me he went to a 20th anniversary listening party for Built to Spill. And I was like, that's great. What bar was that in? How come I didn't know about this? He said, no, it was at some guy's garage. And then he's like, you guys have this new gold can beer? He's like, that's all the host brought, this garage lager. He's like, I was at a garage party drinking your garage lager. And I was kind of like, you got the spirit of it. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. No,
And bring back listening parties. That's really got me inspired now.
Yeah, no, it's like you're thinking.
And I know, it was
Listen to
some
Kid A.
neighborhood guy threw a listening party in his garage.
That's amazing.
I
Yeah.
love it.
You guys could throw some killer listening parties at any of your places.
Oh yeah, we've had some pretty big name fun artists now perform at the Barrel Warehouse and the Tap Room. Yeah, we need to pull out the vinyl and get some old school listening parties going.
Chicago Weekly new releases on vinyl or something.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that for a little bit. Is Ken and I both have the audio background as kind of opening up a rogue recording studio within Goose Island.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, when we leased out where we barrel age our beer now over in Sacramento, Mike and I talked about this. It was so big at the time, we never thought we'd be able to fill that fully with barrels. Now it is fully filled with barrels, but we thought, wow, with this extra space, because both him and I had such a history there, as did Greg Hall and some other people, we said, let's let's build a replica of Lounge Acts, which was a famous music venue in Chicago. And there were a couple people that were like, found out Mike worked merch there for a while.
Underage. I was
some-
underage.
Some paraphernalia from there. And,
Don't tell anyone.
But
I worked the skin graft merch counter, I think as an 18-year-old. And that dude who would always check IDs.
yeah, that guy, man. Check my
You guys go to Lounge Acts? You ever make it to Lounge Acts?
Too young, are you kidding?
I always heard about it, but I never made it.
Yeah, I forget where I was going with that.
Memory lane.
That would have been so cool if you guys do a dive bar inside of one of your giant.
Our old logistics, our supply chain manager, Chris Anderson, I think he says he has the old bar or merch counter at Lounge Acts. I've got a bunch of cassette recordings of like Tortoise and Mule and all those
Remember
bands.
that guy that used to record everything?
Yeah. Hated him because he had much better equipment than me.
I saw him at Fireside a couple times. I think he would do that there.
I was literally just going to like a full-size cassette recorder. This guy's got a DAT, like that kind of
Everyone let him
set up with some,
XY mics.
Yeah, his boom, right?
He's never done anything with it. He's got some
Invite him over
great
for a beer.
archive of.
Yeah, just have him over for the weekly,
I recorded Nirvana's last shows at the Ergo.
Jeez.
It sounded like
From
crap,
your
but
pocket, right?
from my pocket,
So, what's something people should be looking out for from Goose? Like, what's coming up for you guys? What are you excited about in terms of the future?
Yeah, that's the
Obviously,
immediate
yes,
focus.
yes.
But beyond that, I mean, like I said, we are so stocked up with releases pretty much every month. We're doing Cinco Mas, which is a lager with ginger and lime juice, a little bit of smoke malt inspired by a mezcal mule. We're, the Folder One series is ongoing. Obviously Bourbon County is pretty much always on our minds. It's always, trying to keep things interesting in that regard. I'll get fired. I'm well
We're trying to
trained.
wait as long as we can to
Well
announce
trained, yeah.
Right.
what the variants are going to be.
But those are always and again, through the pilot brewery and the tap room, you come in once a week and you're going to see a different lineup there every week. So my job is fun in that there's always something new, probably a dozen things.
Yeah, John here at the pub is always working on something. Tim at our Philadelphia pub has had some great beers lately.
They just got his bullpen session ale into the Citizens Bank Park.
Yeah, for the
Phillies
Phillies.
play and
Yeah,
all that,
really
so.
exciting.
So they're exploring out there too, then in Philly. Cool.
Oh yeah.
We really do have a lot of new beers between Born and Raised's Cream Ale and Natural Villain, the lager that we talked about, but Next Coast IPA. We have Paper Umbrella coming out again, which uses a really exciting Sabro new hop that gives off coconut pineapple flavor.
Pitchfork, going back to music, we always team up with Pitchfork.
RK Quartz we're making a beer with this year for Pitchfork. SPF, our Saison Passion Fruit beer is new out on shelves right now. A lot of new stuff, a lot of exciting beers.
And it will continue to be that way.
So constant innovation is on the horizon.
Research and development.
But yeah, we still have 312 Urban Wheat Ale and Goose IPA and some of the beers that have been around for a long time that we're never gonna forget about, and Honker's Ale. And come to the tap room, come to the pub, drink Honkers, and so yeah.
And then Next Coast, right? So Next Coast, when did that just?
Yeah, Next Coast IPA is doing amazing right now. People love it. It's doesn't have that hazy sort of protein laden filling of the East Coast IPAs these days, or the overly bitterness of the West Coast IPAs. That's why we're Next Coast. It's very, very unique and different. And you mentioned, how it looks. I think it's got a very unique color to it. aroma. It's very good. It's doing great.
Great. Thank you guys so much for your time. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Wait, pass it out.
Oh, way down there. You go.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having us.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap this up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here we go. So,
We can talk about beer forever.
I know.
That's the easy part.
So that wraps up this episode of 2 Beers and a Podcast with Brad and Mike.
If you like what you heard, please do the liking, subscribing, and rating. If you have an idea for a topic and pairing, message at 2BeersPod on Twitter. And if you want to learn more about our web, video, and social media marketing services, visit 2beersandapodcast.com or email 2beerspod@gmail.com.
Till next time, keep telling your stories.
Keep drinking, keep tweeting.
All out.
All right. Awesome. That was great.
That was awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Great
I love it.
Thanks for doing it, right? Like, obviously, we're very successful here. It's not like I won't shy away from the questions. But there's some misconceptions out there about what we do and who we are, and the opportunity to just come out and be normal.
Right. Yeah. It's good.
That's not even a business. It's just because care.
Sure. I think the earlier response to what you said, just like this is how we get our beers other places in the world. Like I same thing. Belgian beers, like in mind. Like how you get that? There's some.
Supporting local guys, man. We play more
In the city than anybody else. So.
That's doing the job. That's doing the
I
right
just
thing.
think it's a disservice to beer drinkers if you're convincing people to only drink locally. Like, yeah, when I go to I don't know, Austin or something, I want to drink, see what's going on there that I maybe can't get around.
Can't
but
get around there, yeah.
man, if those guys can't experience beers from San Francisco or something, like that sucks.
And there's nothing just because it's local makes it better than anywhere else. It's, but the only advantage of local is that it's right there.
Well, I think it makes sense when local is the best quality beer.
Yeah.
Quality is always first for me.
Yes, it has to be.
Local comes after that. It's a consideration, but when the local beer is the best beer, it's a great matchup. And when I travel different places,
Well, especially if local is specific to the geography, like, oh, we only get this fruit here.
Yeah, and there's less and less of that.
Something.
Things are homogenized a lot more. I always bring up the pulled pork analogy.
Yeah.
It's like pulled pork used to be a regional specialty of the Carolinas, right? And now it's like you get pulled pork anywhere,
Right.
Arby's or something.
Yeah,
It's like,
get that.
it used to be like we would travel. We'd
Are there weird examples?
You're not that out of touch. Like it's I'm not saying it's a wholesale bad thing. It's just you used to have to go to Cologne to get Kolsch, right? We make it Kolsch. It's like that's a good thing, but there's also something. It takes a little bit of something out of it. Where as somebody who likes to travel, and the homogeneity just domestically and internationally is. I mean, English breweries now are like full-on hazy IPA makers.
Yeah.
And not even with their own hops, with American hops. So it's like it's come full circle from Honker's Ale, right?
Yeah.
Chicago being inspired by London, now it's London being inspired by Chicago and other parts of the country. And it is what it is.
Yeah. Local, like anything else, is like a heuristic. It's just like when you're faced with that big wall of beer at the grocery store, you're trying to figure out what do I do. Like, these guys are close to me. Yeah. Sometimes it makes it easy to make a decision. But like I'm in Evanston, we got 4 or 5 breweries now, I think technically. And
Claudia was
and so
started right around the same time as me. She was actually the receptionist when I started, and then she came out as a brewer. I don't know.
She's at Pipeworks now.
Is she at
Clybourn?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So
She was at Temperance for a while.
So I like every time they open up a new one, I'd be out there. I'd be like, Evanston Brewery, and and like I don't love them all equally. I have the ones I love, and then the other ones that I don't care for as much, and I want to love them because they're Evanston and they're local, but I don't, and so I don't really drink their beers that much.
I mean, I love that people. I said we're inspired by Chicago.
Yeah, right.
I love that people consider us a Chicago brewery. When we're in London, I want people to say like, "That's a U.S. brewery," right? Like, so,
Right.
So
one thing there's some influence from your
One thing I did have was I know you guys are friends with Josh Knoll, or at least you're on friendly terms. But he's very big on transparency, and so like pretty much anytime he has a chance to mention that ABI owns XYZ brewery, he'll mention it in an article, or call it out on Twitter. But he's also he's one of the people that mentions a lot.
We don't hide the fact that.
No,
right.
I know.
That's why I'm willing to talk about it.
That's fine. And but one of the things that he and other people will talk about is 312 gets made in Colorado and New York instead of here in Chicago. I almost asked you that, and we were into something else and didn't feel.
Yeah, it was inspired by Chicago when I grew up.
But then, you don't. So you just shrug your shoulders, like it's not important to it doesn't matter that it's made somewhere else if it's supposed to be
here.
Just because it's
Started here, was inspired by Chicago, same beer.
Yeah, just the inspiration.
Couldn't make it anymore.
Right.
Does it matter if Boston Lager's made in Cincinnati? I don't know.
That's a good question. Yes.
It's at least it's not unique to us either.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah, that's fair.
I think we make decisions that are what's best for the brewery, best for the beer, and we were making 312 around the clock when I started. In a couple
I
of
hope
years.
people just like the beer.
Right.
Yeah.
So
It feels like the punk conversation. Like so many times that we had
absolutely.
this, who cares if they just get paid for being
Right.
Let them get,
I
it's
will
not
give you
fun
that
to struggle
analogy,
with 13
man,
people.
And I dealt with it so many times.
I
That's
bet.
why I'm used to this.
Yeah.
Because that's what
but-
you got. Right.
I worked for big labels, and so many bands got called sellouts, right?
Mhm.
Way before this was happening.
They're starving.
And what the bands were like, and then they're like, their original audience was pissed off at them, but they're like, man, then screw them, because now we have money to go into a studio and make it the way we want to make it, have a producer, and actually have time to do it. Before we had to do it in 6 hours, and it didn't sound anything like we wanted it to sound.
We spent 10 years in a van.
Yeah, they're like, so man, but they also, same thing I said, that John Hall had, they were like, I put a lot of effort into my art, and I would love for the world to hear it. I
Right.
would like to
Yeah,
have
you don't wanna
people
make it for
hear my art. I
20
don't want
people.
just a small amount of people to hear it. So this record label is giving me the opportunity to bring my art out to the world. So great, that was always my goal. Right? If they didn't care if anybody listened to it, they would have never made a record in the first place. They would have stayed in the garage.